Okay, to get started with your painting, of course you need a bucket of water, you need some paper towels to dry your brush off on, and you need your paint palette. I'm going to need to add some white to my palette as well. Okay, so to start, just really quickly, I'm going to get a little bit of water on my brush and get some watery paint, sort of the darker color. You know, there's no white mixed in here. And I'm just using a little round brush, and I'm going to go over, again, looking at my picture, some of the areas that I know need to be dark, because I don't want these to go away if I start to paint. So this will sort of help to seal what you did with the charcoal, if you took that step, or even what you did do with the graphite initially. So this is sort of a glaze. I'm watering down the paint so it flows off my brush really easily, because these are the things that I want to stay, and I want to stay dark. I don't want to lose any of these important lines. Okay, so I would take some time and do this first, where you're just blocking in some of the areas that are going to be the darkest in your painting. So this is where that step before is important, where you guys sort of outlined some of your shadows and highlights. So this is the time where you would want to paint those in. Okay, so again, I'm just, I'm looking at my picture and blocking in the important stuff that I know I need. Okay, so you would just work around your composition, painting in all of the dark areas. The more water you add, the lighter the paint will be, just like watercolor. Now this is okay for the first step, okay, but then we do want to get some nice thick layers of acrylic laid down. This is literally just to block in the basic shapes. This is important. We don't want to lose the shape of this eye. Okay, and then a little shadow on the cheek. Okay, so I'm going to just go ahead and keep working on this, and I guess I'll sort of time lapse it for you guys. Okay, so when you're happy with what you've blocked in, you can then start to paint your canvas. So what you're going to do is I would start with background. So I'm going to have some contrast with the highlights here against a darker background. So that's where I'm going to start. So I'm going to pick up just a smidge of white and blend that in with my base color, and I'm just going to start painting. So at this point you want to use less. You can put down some water to help it blend if you wanted to. It's sort of like a trick from sort of a Bob Ross trick. But this is just the first coat. So you don't have to worry about it being perfectly smooth right now. We'll get it there if you want a smooth gradient for your background. So this is just going to be sort of a base coat. So just paint the background. Now, if areas of your painting are damp, like sort of start to get dry, they get a little tacky, you don't want to keep painting over that area, because what that will do is it'll start to pull up the paint, and that is not a good thing. So I'm going to just make a little puddle here of my paint. So, you know, once you apply the paint, sometimes you have to just kind of walk away from it, let it dry, because you don't want to have little bald spots in your painting. Okay, so you're going to work kind of quickly, get some color down in the background. This brush I picked is probably too small, but that's okay. So this is a very light coat of paint. There's a technique called impasto, which is sort of what like Monet and Van Gogh used, where it's a really thick application of paint and you can feel as well as see the brush strokes, which is a cool technique too. So if you feel like you want to try that, you can do that as you build up the layers. Okay, so acrylic painting, the first layer you paint is not going to be the last layer you paint. You have to build up those layers. Okay, and you can see, I think, that as I'm working here, I'm adding in the white and it's still maintaining a dark value. This paint is sort of translucent, so you do need to add the white to make it a little bit more opaque. And it'll still stay kind of dark, even with a little touch of white. Okay. And I do have table easels if you guys prefer to work, you know, more vertically rather than just laying down on a table, so that's up to you. I am doing it this way for demonstration purposes, of course. And again, you do want to dry off your brushes because you don't want to add a ton of water to this at this point. Okay, so I have a base coat for the background, and you can always decide to change this. Okay, as you work, maybe you're like, ooh, I want this to be lighter, or oh, I want this to be way darker, you know, and that could change depending on how you paint your face. Okay, so nothing is final at this stage in the game. Okay. So now what I would want to do is start mixing up some different values of my paint, so I could start blocking in the areas where I want shadows and highlights. So maybe I would mix up a very light color, a medium color, okay, and then also start to think about where you want to start adding in black. Okay, I haven't done that yet. I'm going to stick with just my color and white for now. Okay, and then I'll pick this up and do a darker. So if you have these to start with, it'll make your life a little bit easier, because then you can just sort of start to block in colors. So also, when you're mixing up the paint, try to keep your puddles of paint kind of small. That way it will prevent the paint from drying out quickly. If they're sort of spread out like this, it dries out very fast. Okay, so I'm going to clean my brush. And so now I'm going to start looking for areas where I have some highlights. So here is a very light area, so block that in on the little nose here. Okay, and then all along the forehead and the top of the head, it's all very light. The light sort of reflecting from the water. Okay. And then as you work, you can kind of blend those little puddles together to make all the in-between shades. And you can see as I'm painting, the underpainting that I did is still showing through. So it's going to help me remember, like, ooh, that has to be darker over there, right? And acrylic does blend nicely as long as you've got enough of it down on your canvas and it's still totally wet. If it's started to dry at all, it's going to be difficult to blend.